On your Tuesday episode of Locked On Raptors, the Raptors have yet to hire a head coach. It seems like everybody else is, including Philly hiring Nick Nurse. We'll talk about what that means for our feelings. Plus, Sergio Scariolo, is he potentially one of those finalists? How do we feel about that? We'll talk about trade feelings as well. A loaded episode as we talk about a very murky Raptors offseason with Vivek Jacob at Raptors.com. Let's get to it. Thanks for hanging.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Tuesday, May the 30th, and I'm your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 9 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Twitter. If you're still on Twitter, at Woodley Sean. You can follow the show on Instagram at Locked On Raptors. And of course, join the Locked On Raptors Discord community, baby. It's a ton of fun talking about fake trades, talking about the playoffs, laughing at the misfortune of the Boston Celtics. It's all wonderful good times. A great little community we got building around the show. Plus, sometimes I give out free stuff in there, and you're going to want to be in the Discord to get access to any free stuff I get my mitts on, and I'm there to pass along. So we handed out some free gift subscriptions to Rafael Barlow's NBA Big Board Substack, for example. It's a great time, so please jump on in there. The link is in the description of the podcast. Come hang out. Also support the podcast by rating, reviewing, subscribing on all the different podcast apps, and on YouTube. You're the best people in the world if you go ahead and do that, so thanks in advance. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, on today's show, Vivek Jacob at Raptors.com is along in our new graphical digs. I'm in that the vertical box, so my hand talking is going to have to be more constrained this time, which I'm getting used to as a very pronounced hand talker typically. But we're going to dig into the coaching situation, which remains very murky for the Raptors, as Adrian Griffin's been hired away by the Milwaukee Bucks. Nick Nurse, of course, landing with the Phildelphia 76ers yesterday. And the Raptors are still kind of looking around like, we're taking our time. No worries. We're sort of chilling. Is it good that they're chilling? We'll get into that conversation in today's show. Also, we'll do a little trade feeling status check as it pertains to Pascal Siakam and O.G. Anunoby, the two guys whose names don't go a single hour in the Locked On Raptors Discord without being added to a fake trade. So we'll get into that as well. But off the top, Nick Nurse to Philly, Big V, this one has a whole lot of emotional baggage with it, does it not?
Yeah, that's one way to put it. Yeah, it was wild because even when, the Bucks made their decision, you're still thinking, okay, well, that probably means Nick is going to Phoenix. And so the fact that he went with Philly, he might either see a situation where, he won't be judged. This might sound a bit weird to say because it's Philly, but he might not be judged on as high a scale as Phoenix. And you look at Matt Ishbia moving on from Monty Williams. Obviously, everything is championship. Philly has not even reached the conference finals. So
say that again. It's really fun to remind ourselves of that.
Philly has not reached the conference finals. And so even that would be success.
So warm and toasty.
He takes the Sixers to the conference finals. That is an improvement on what they've accomplished in the process era. And so that would be a win. Obviously, the ultimate goal is to win the championship, and that's what he's going to be focused on. But I think the other side of this, too, is it was pretty clear that James Harden wasn't happy with Doc Rivers as the head coach. And so maybe this gives you a better chance at re-signing him. James Harden has had some praise for Nick Nurse in the past, as have other players. But I think if this improves the chances of bringing him back, because the Sixers don't really have a way of obtaining a star if he moves on, then I think that is an important thing to remember as well. So if you can keep that trio together of Embiid, Maxey, Harden, and then, build around that. You don't need to build too much because Nick's only going to play 7 guys. But I think overall, of the coaches remaining, he was probably at the top of the list. It seemed that way between the Bucks, the Suns, and the Sixers. And yeah, they got their guy.
Yeah, they sure did. It's really funny that the two guys who you could argue Nick Nurse tormented the most with his defensive stylings over the last 4 or 5 years are James Harden and Joel Embiid. And now they get to be coached by Nick Nurse and not double teamed into oblivion by Nick Nurse. I'm fascinated by how they're going to play. I think this will be a really good sort of test case for the idea that Nick Nurse was kind of stuck in his ways. Because, like, I don't think they can play the same defense with Joel Embiid and James Harden and Tyrese Maxey that they wanted to play in Toronto. And I think Nick Nurse will probably adapt, but that's certainly going to be a thing to watch going into the year. My question for you here, Big V, is like the Philly Nick Nurse curse that is yet to happen, but I'm sure will come to pass at some point, as Nick Nurse probably will torment the Raptors for the rest of time, just kind of as like a prank. Does this have the potential to be a more damaging curse than the Dwane Casey Pistons curse? Obviously they fired Dwane Casey after winning Coach of the Year, so the karmic retribution was going to be a little greater, I think, in favor of Casey. But I don't know about you. I think the Sixers are the team I dislike the most. I think they're probably the closest thing to a rival the Raptors have right now. And there is a little bit of like really? You had to go there element of Nurse signing with the Sixers that I'm not really thrilled about what these matchups are going to entail. Because like we've said all along, Nick Nurse, a very good coach. There will probably come a time where you miss having Nick Nurse as your coach when you're in the pressure cooker of a game that needs the right adjustments and levers pulled. I think it was the right move for everyone to move on. But did it have to be Philly? Like, this kind of bums me out, man.
Yeah, I mean, in the sense, again, you go back to what has defined success for Philly in the process era. I think that is where Nick Nurse could potentially look back, say he's there for 3-4 years, takes them to a conference finals, takes them to an NBA finals, and then he'll probably say, take that, Toronto. And, and so I think that potential is certainly there. But again, I think, if you come to a January game and Nick has Embiid playing 45 minutes, even though the Sixers are up 20 in Toronto, and then they lose in April, the karmic retribution comes right back. So
yeah, man, it's a really, really fascinating landing spot, man. There's as far as like intrigue goes, I think this is probably as good as it gets. Even if I'm worried it's going to mean all sorts of doom for the Raptors whenever they play the Sixers going forward. I can tell you one thing. I don't think Nick Nurse's guitar wailing "I'm a cool rock man" guy thing is going to fly in Philly. I think if he goes to play a show at a Philly bar, I feel like he might get tomatoes thrown at him. Like, why aren't you coaching? I don't know. That wasn't a Philly accent at all. But it's just a generic Northeast agro sports fan voice, I suppose. Fascinating stuff. Nick Nurse is not the coach of the Toronto Raptors. We'll stop lingering and dwelling on our exes and look at who the future paramours might be as we get into the current state of the Raptors coaching search. We'll talk about Sergio Scariolo, a report this morning that he is a finalist for the job. So we'll get into that and all sorts of coaching stuff. How we're feeling about the Raptors' seeming lack of urgency to bring somebody in. Does it bother us? Is it actually maybe a good process? We'll get to that, plus some trade feelings. Before we get into all that, got to tell you about our friends over at Game Time. It's really should not be hard for buying tickets. Like, it really should be like the easiest thing in the world to buy tickets to a sporting event that you want to go to. And I highly recommend you check out our friends over at Game Time to do it, because they have last minute deals. They make it super easy and super convenient to go and get the tickets you want for the games that you want to go to. you can, find last minute tickets on anything from basketball, football, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets on the same section or row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. There's no reason not to try out Game Time for the Game Time guarantee. And that really is, that's the end of the story. Get images of your seat before you buy so you know exactly what you get when you arrive as well. You can buy your tickets in a matter of seconds, just two taps in your set, and you don't got to worry about scrolling through your email. They send them right to your phone, so you're not holding up the line at the door either. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, we continue on here with your first listen of the day. Big V along as we continue talking Raptors coaching search and the current state of it. This morning, a report coming out, retweeted by our pal Michael Grange out of Italy. Andrea Tosi, I believe, is the reporter, suggesting that Sergio Scariolo is, in fact, a finalist for the Toronto Raptors job. Of course, the reports were out there a while ago that the Raptors brass went over to interview with Sergio Scariolo, who's currently coaching at Bologna in the Italian league or the Euro League. It's all very confusing, the many tiers of leagues they have in England, in overseas, so bear with me. Either way, Scariolo, thoughts on his potential fit with the Raptors? Of course, a familiar face, was with the Raptors when they won the championship as an assistant coach, coaches the Spain national team as well. Certainly would apply the sort of thinking outside the box and going with a sort of new direction and a new voice and some new ideas kind of idea that I think a lot of people have wanted to see. What are your impressions of the Raptors reportedly getting maybe close here with Sergio Scariolo as one of the finalists for the job?
Yeah, I think he would be a really good hire. I think he made a really good impression during his time here. He also might have moved on because he sensed where things were headed. And so I think, you bring him in with the experience that he has. And I think the biggest thing for me is when you think of the Spanish national team, you think of the culture that they have together, and what Masai is trying to bring back to Toronto. He would absolutely fit the bill, right? And so I think that makes perfect sense. I think, when you watch the Spanish team play that beautiful team basketball, and then the way
sweating thinking about passing and movement. Wow.
I think obviously, the FIBA game kind of caters more to that kind of team play and whatnot, and he'll have to make adjustments where, in the NBA, obviously it's more superstar driven, and whoever your best player is driven. But I do think he would have wrinkles to the offense that we have not seen for a little while. And so I think that would be a big bonus. He's big on, this is not like just some, offensive specialist. He prides himself on the defensive end. He prides himself on work ethic. And again, that culture that the Spanish national team has maintained, I think that is the type of thing you want to bring to Toronto.
For sure. I'm curious. So Scariolo obviously has like the institutional knowledge. He was there 2018 to 2021. Was there for the most successful run the team ever had. The two, I think, best runs the team ever had in back-to-back years. What is your sort of view on getting in people who have kind of been within the Raptors at sort of their peak versus just kind of getting some fresh ideas? This, I think, kind of came up with Adrian Griffin. He was obviously, I think, a contender for the Raptors job. They reported to have interviewed him. He ends up getting signed up by the Milwaukee Bucks. Good for Adrian Griffin. But I'm having a hard time kind of deciding whether or not I'm happy with the sort of turnover of the brass who's going to be kind of running things on the bench versus getting in people who have been there and seen the Raptors at their peak and seen why it works and how it all works. Obviously, part of why it all worked when Sergio Scariolo was here was they got Kawhi Leonard for a year. That was awesome, and he makes everybody look good. But kind of curious of your sort of philosophy on this. Like, do you think it's a good idea to dip back into the people who have been involved in the franchise for a long time, or would you like to see them skew more towards like a Jordy Fernandez or a Kevin Young, two guys who have reportedly interviewed quite well, and just kind of outside ideas from different franchises? Like I think you can make an argument both ways. I'm curious where you sit.
Yeah, I think an important learning here is the fact that, when Masai hired Nick Nurse, we all kind of looked at that sideways and said, well, how is this a departure from Dwane Casey? Because he was from the same staff, right?
Sure.
And we see that once you move from that assistant role to the head coaching gig, you get a completely different philosophy. You get a completely different environment. And so I would not look at an assistant coach and say, yeah, it's going to necessarily be, the same ideas coming back or whatever it might be. Yeah, structurally, maybe there are things that they look to bring back in terms of what they saw that did work. But I think overall, Scariolo has enough history outside of the Raptors to know that it will be a different experience from Nick Nurse. And so I think that is the main thing to evaluate. And obviously, someone who's completely fresh would bring something very different. But I think in terms of the principles, in terms of being able to marry what you bring in terms of your philosophy and what it's been for Scariolo with the national team coaching at the club level in Europe, and knowing what the Raptors have in place, I think that we talk about that institutional knowledge. I think being able to mesh the two before you even step in and present that, I think that's probably a big plus for the Raptors right now.
For sure. I think there's something to the idea of like having a built-in relationship with guys on the team as well. Also, a guy who notably wasn't on the team during Scariolo's time was Scotty Barnes. And how does that, I think ultimately like how Scotty Barnes takes to the new coach might be the most important thing here, all told. So maybe, there's extra weight put on that. I mean, it's hard not to respect Sergio Scariolo. The dude's been unbelievably successful his entire life as a coach. It's really fascinating. I think I'm with you. Like, I don't mind the mesh of like a guy who's kind of seen it, who also clearly brings different ideas and a different perspective. Ultimately, I kind of just want them to hire someone at this point. Are you at all concerned about the sort of length of time it's taken here? I know there's sort of like the idea that, they're not doing anything. They're just kind of biding their time and they're letting things pass them by. And this guy gets hired. I don't think they're like having any like opportunity cost lost here because they haven't hired anybody. I understand the impatience because there's a desire to see what the direction of the team is going to be, and the head coach will probably at least give a little bit of an indicator of that.
There's a desire for content, Sean. That's all.
Well, that too. I mean, I am hosting a daily podcast here. It'd be really cool if we could get some damn news to talk about. But are you at all sort of worried about the long, drawn-out process here? Will it bleed too far into the pre-draft process, et cetera, et cetera? Or would you rather just see them take their time and get it right here?
I think this was always the plan. And I mean, I even tweeted pretty much in the first round of the playoffs that this will likely go into the last week of May, the first week of June. And you look at the Nick Nurse hiring that happened in the first week of June, and that was an internal hire, right? So I think the Raptors will do their due diligence. They will want to feel as sure about this choice as they would say, a draft pick. And I think they will look at this and say, there's also, I don't know if you call it extenuating circumstances, but the fact that once Philly, Milwaukee, and Phoenix decided to move on from their head coaches, they moved down to number 4 in the pecking order.
Yeah.
And so they were just going to have to see how those things played out. And so I would not be surprised that now that those things are shaping up, we did see a decision come soon.
Yeah, it is a bit of a domino thing, right? And I do think I don't believe the Raptors are going to be in on one of the sort of high-priced dudes who got let go. Like the Monty Williams thing would be a really nice thing, I think, in a vacuum, but I just can't see them convincing Monty Williams, who just got fired with 3 years and like $21 million left on his deal. Like, that's going to take quite a pitch. It would take quite a pitch to get me to give up sitting on my butt for 3 years, making $7 million a year, hanging out with my family, to come and coach the Toronto Raptors. I'm telling you. So I don't think that's happening. Budenholzer just doesn't feel like the right fit at the right time, even though I think there's actually maybe an argument for Budenholzer being maybe a decent fit. But I think that would be a non-starter among Raptors fans who love to clown Mike Budenholzer. It's fascinating. I would like to see something happen here soon, mostly because of the content, like you said. But ultimately, I think I'm fine with them taking their time. If you recall, like, it took them like a month to land on Nick Nurse as well. Like, this was not a quick process back when they hired their last coach. So this is kind of as they operate, I would assume. And I feel like they still probably know internally like what they want to do as far as like player personnel stuff this summer. And as much as the coach might indicate to us what they want to do, it doesn't mean that because they haven't hired a coach, there's an absence of a plan as far as what they want to do this offseason. So that's kind of where I would come down on that to sort of quell the concerns about the lack of urgency here to hire a coach. Why be urgent when you can get it right and take your time and interview lots of people and cast a wide net, including to podcasters, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to come back on the other side, get into our feelings on the trade stuff. There were reports that the Houston Rockets maybe have number 4 available, and maybe the Raptors have talked to them. It's a time to sort of consider our feelings about many Toronto Raptors players and their long-term outlook with the team. We will get into that in a hot second here. Before we do that, however, just a reminder, go check out Locked On NBA Big Board, a wonderful resource to get prep for the draft. Rafael Barlow is just incredible on the show regularly. Also, Richard Stamen, Leaf Thulin doing a great job over on that show every day, getting you ready for the NBA draft at the end of June. So go subscribe to Locked On NBA Big Board, wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. All right, Big V. Let's round it out here. Trade feelings status check. I think at the start of the summer, I went in being like, you know what? That sucked the way they lost, but I'm cool kind of running it back. I still mostly think I feel that way, though I'm coming around. I've been trade machine poisoned, as is typically what happens in late May as you're waiting for the draft and all this stuff. But I just kind of want to get a little temperature check on where you are right now with what the Raptors should be doing. I think particularly when it comes to the idea of trading up in the draft and inevitably what that means for Pascal Siakam and O.G. Anunoby, who are the two guys who, A, are under contract so they can be traded, and it's not like a big hole to do a sign and trade, et cetera, and who, in theory, could be moved to better set the Raptors up both financially and with assets and whatnot in the years to come. Where are you at right now? Are you kind of leaning towards wanting to see one of those guys moved? If so, whom? Are you maybe more on the run it back side of things, seeing how the NBA playoffs have gone and prepping for a summer of chaos where surely lots of teams are going to get into the transaction mix? Where are you at right now with your feelings regarding the Toronto Raptors and they're potentially trading one or both of their 3 or 4 best players?
Yeah, if I'm checking the temperature for players on this roster, I'm probably looking at Pascal. And if I'm looking at Pascal, then I'm leaving OG off the table because I think he's at an age where he kind of fits the Scotty timeline better. And so I wouldn't see the point in giving him up separately as well. So, yeah, I would definitely see what's available for Pascal. Again, I said this a week or two ago. If there is that type of, Paul George for SGA deal to be made now, or that, if you go back to the Indiana days, Paul George for Victor Oladipo, that type of deal, where you get a young star to pair with Scotty, who maybe fits better, more of a shooter, that type of thing, then I would entertain it. And so I think that's the way I lean right now, and would be examining those possibilities. Yeah, I think at this point I've seen enough with the shooting to know that has to be addressed. And the biggest piece is probably the best way to address it.
Yeah, look, I don't like the idea of trading Pascal Siakam. I'm emotionally attached to Pascal Siakam. Everyone who listens to this podcast know that. I'm a little bit, I can't see straight on this one entirely. That said, I don't think it's good business to just go trade him for like futures and crap, right? Like, I don't think that's good business. I would rather just keep the very good player who's given every indication he'd like to stay on your team for the next 5 years instead of trading them away for future assets who might one day become as good as a Pascal Siakam, but probably won't. And like that said, I've come around on the idea of like if there's like a no-brainer, like oh god, this trade that this team is putting out there for the Raptors to swap Pascal, like it's just kind of a no-brainer. Then yeah, sure, I'm on the board of yes, that makes the most sense going forward. I don't agree with the idea that Scotty and Pascal can't fit together. I'm even open to the idea that a Scotty, Pascal, Yak trio in the front court could in some way fit together. It didn't wonderfully down the stretch of the season. That said, that starting five was crushing it and was really good on both offense and defense. And so I still think there's something there. Even if maybe you get to the pressure cooker of a playoff series, it becomes a little bit more difficult to manage the lack of spacing, et cetera, et cetera. I would rather just build out the rosters so you have counters in that case to support the good players you have on the roster and not have to run the same five players for every situation. But that's just me. I think I'm very much out on trading OG. Every time I think about it, and spoiler alert, I traded OG coming up in our Locked On NBA mock draft, okay? I did it for the content, but back to the through line of this episode, for the content. And I won't reveal the trade right now, but OG gets moved in our Locked On NBA mock draft. And the second I made that trade, I thought, shouldn't have done that. Because, you're right. He fits really nicely, and there's no world, I think, in which he doesn't work as a good fit next to Scotty Barnes going forward. He's a wonderful fit next to Jakob Poeltl. We presume he's going to be brought back. And I think the chemistry those two established down the stretch of the season was amazing. Yes, it gets tricky when you start thinking about paying $30, $35, $40 million a year for a guy who can't really create his own shot. But he's such a one-of-one defender that you're going to miss it the second he's not there. And it's a dubious proposition. And I think trading OG from this roster without trading Pascal almost exacerbates the problems you already have, because you're getting rid of one of your only reliable dead-eye three-point shooters in the interest of assembling the roster a little more effectively around those guys. Maybe you bring back real shooters. I would just rather keep the real shooter who is OG, who is also one of the best defenders alive, because I can guarantee you're not getting one of the best defenders alive back in the return for an OG and Anunoby trade. So with Pascal, what is sort of like the threshold you're looking for of like, this has to be in the package, otherwise it's a non-starter for me, and like just run it back and see what you got with this group with maybe some tinkering on the margins?
I mean, in terms of players coming back specifically, like, I don't know, that's a tough one. I'd have to actually like look at rosters and evaluate that.
I get not even just specific players, I guess, but just sort of like general concept of the trade construction, like picks, young players, like
a young star for sure. Mm-hmm. And then picks to go along with that as well. Maybe if you can pick up a rotation veteran, that would be nice. Yeah, that would be what I'm looking at. Again, like I was saying before, if there's like that Paul George for Oladipo type, where, Indiana kind of knew they had to move on and brought back a very, very promising young player. Obviously, unfortunate that injuries happen. But I think that type of player, that tier of player with that age group is what I'd be looking for. And so, say if Portland is a team that a lot of people are bringing up, for sure I want Shaedon Sharpe in the deal. And then you look at what type of picks can come along with that. I don't think Portland would give up this year's pick plus Shaedon Sharpe. So I think you'd have to look at something else. But yeah. I really like Shaedon Sharpe. I think he's going to be special.
Yeah, I guess I'm less sure on him because I am dubious of any time a guy looks really good in a team that's clearly given up. Like, we call that Malachi Flynn syndrome, baby. Former East Rookie of the Month, Malachi Flynn. Woohoo! Not to say Shaedon Sharpe is Malachi Flynn. He's clearly more talented than that. I am a little less sure, I guess, of him than a lot of people seem to be. I think, yeah, it's really hard to find a trade. Why I ultimately think he's not getting moved is just it's really hard to find a trade that would actually satisfy what the Raptors want here. And what they want from their actions seems that they want to contend next year. Not contend, but compete. And not take a step back. In fact, try to take a step forward. They traded away their first round pick. Like, that is, I think, the telegraphing of their intentions. And so unless you're getting someone who helps you to compete next year, I have a hard time just sort of envisioning a deal where it happens. Again, teams get desperate. I think Portland is a candidate
Unless you get a
to
top
get
6
desperate.
pick.
Yeah. I mean, I don't really care about the fourth or third, even like the third pick, unless it's Scoot Henderson. Like, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like too much of a draft skeptic, but like I don't care about.
No. I'm saying next year's pick.
Oh, yeah,
top
right.
6 protected, right?
Right.
So.
Well, they're not doing that. They're not going to be that bad. Like they're not.
So I mean, just looking down the rosters right now, San Antonio seemed like they want to compete right away. So if they were interested in Pascal, if there's a deal that brings you back, like a Vassell plus other pieces, like then I think that's something you would look at.
I would be shocked if the Spurs did that, honestly. Like, Vassell's awesome and seems like a perfect fit with Wembanyama, no?
Yes. But I do think, in terms of having someone who's ready to win now, and can maybe, really take that pressure off. Again, I'm just spitballing. I'm just looking at the rosters right now.
Your fake trades are bad, Big V.
I don't know. I think those are 2 pretty good players I named. So we'll see.
They are, for sure. I don't know. I think we always underrate the difficulty of actually making these trades happen because everyone overvalues their own guys. And like the Blazers are going to overvalue what they've got. And the Rockets will surely overvalue what they've got. I don't even know what a Rockets trade would look like because outside of the 4th overall pick, like none of their players feel very attractive to me. Maybe Şengün, but like try to find the salary matching there. It's pretty difficult to do. The whole Rockets team is just cheap, bad players who don't know how to play team basketball. So it's hard. I'm coming around on just running it back being maybe the best solution, honestly, if there's not a clear no-brainer trade. And I know that's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's the way the front office is probably going to lean.
Yeah. I mean, that's been their history is they tend to be pretty patient with these things. That said, I'm more open to the idea of a Pascal trade than maybe I was before, just because of the fit concerns and the money. Honestly, the money is really, like, just thinking about how this second apron is going to inhibit teams, and even the first luxury tax threshold is going to inhibit teams going forward. Like, that's going to be like a serious. That's like maybe the biggest story in the NBA over the next few years is how that changes team building and sort of forces teams to make tough decisions financially. And that is where I think I see the argument for a Pascal deal more than I do like as far as like the actual talent return that you could probably get for Pascal. It's going to be hard to get a guy or anyone who kind of comes in and is Pascal Siakam. As much as people don't like Pascal anymore, he's bad and all this stuff. He's very good. Sorry, he's just really good, and replacing that is not easy. So fascinating stuff, man. This was a whole episode about how we don't know what the hell the Raptors are going to do. It's great. Don't you love this offseason uncertainty? Isn't it just fantastic? Doesn't it make you feel really good inside and not at all anxious about how the next month is going to go?
Well, I have a pretty good idea that the way they're going to go. I just kind of disagree with it. And so,
right.
The way I would go is pretty different.
Yeah, fair enough. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much, Big V. This was lovely. You got anything you want to plug for the folks out there?
The usual stuff, Raptors.com, CBC Sports, and you can follow me on Twitter at Vivek Jacob.
Hell yeah, everyone go do that. Find me on Twitter at Woodley Sean. Follow, subscribe to, rate, review the show on your favorite podcast apps and on YouTube, of course. And join the Locked On Raptors Discord, baby. It's in the description. The link is in the description, that is. Join us. It's super fun. We have a great time in there. And it's a great little community we're building. It's just the best place to talk about the Raptors on the internet these days. It's what the people are saying. I don't know. It's just the scuttlebutt. So come on, hang out in the Locked On Raptors Discord. We will leave you there. Thank you very much. We'll be back again tomorrow, probably diving into another draft prospect. Maybe we'll take a look at someone who we've talked about 3 guys who I really like so far. Maybe we'll get into someone who I'm a little less hot on for the Raptors at number 13 on tomorrow's show. Perhaps a Keontae George, for example, who, I don't know, man. We'll get to that tomorrow. Looking forward to it. If you haven't yet, go check out the episodes on Jordan Hawkins and Kobe Buffkin and Kaysen Wallace, the everyday listeners of the show. Surely you already have, but if you're not an everydayer, become one, and you'll have all those episodes to peruse through as well. We'll leave it there. Thanks so much for hanging. Bye-bye.